All right. Well, great. The May 2024 meeting of the Alamance County Historic Properties Commission will come to order. So everybody had a chance to read over the minutes from last time? Has anybody got any issues with them?
Just a typo in part 4. Down toward the bottom of the page, the second sentence up, says Megan told the commission that they could possibly be considered. See where the Y is missing from
Yeah.
they. That's the only thing I saw. Everything else, it's all right for me, and that's just splitting hairs.
The easy amendment.
So we don't approve them for now until the typo's been made.
Maybe we approve them as amended.
There you go.
Sure.
I move we approve them as amended.
I second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. So we got that taken care of. I guess we just rejoice that Stephen Dodson isn't on this commission.
That's right, that's splitting hairs. He finds all the hairs.
Uh-huh, that's right. He gets through, you don't need thinning
Splits
scissors.
4 ways.
That's right.
Too.
Do we have any old business?
Not tonight.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna do something that I do sometimes, and I'm gonna propose that we, on this agenda, move 2 to 1 and talk about that. And then if the folks that have come here to talk about it don't wanna listen to the rest of it, they won't be required to. Has anybody got any problem with that? Do you want me to get a motion on this?
To amend the agenda,
Yeah.
I think unless you have dissent, you're fine to amend the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in that case,
Thank
we'll,
you for asking.
are y'all in opposition to us hearing you first? All right, well, in that case, we're gonna talk about the Oak Grove Cemetery. You want to start with it?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In late 2023, someone from the Village of Alamance reached out to the planning department, asking us if there was any designation for the cemetery site that you have in your agenda packet tonight. Ian did find the application form that's part of the agenda that was submitted by the Alamance County Historical Museum, but there were not really any additional documents to that. According to the application, this is an African-American slave cemetery within the Heritage Glen subdivision within the Village of Alamance. The property is located on Yorkshire Drive at parcel ID numbers 172463 and 172464. According to the application, there is believed to be roughly 40 grave sites on the property. The radar testing in 2014 concluded that, quote, 14 GPR anomalies were identified as possible graves and should be treated as such. We also received a letter from the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources concluding that the property, quote, is of special local significance because it is the resting place for approximately 40 enslaved African Americans, end quote. And if the board chooses to move forward with this designation, it will need to be presented for a legislative hearing either at the next HPC meeting, or we'll need to do a joint legislative hearing with the county commissioners in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 160D-946. And Mr. Chairman, as you alluded, we also have gentlemen from the Village of Alamance here to speak as well.
anybody got any questions thus far? Y'all are up.
Thank you, guys. I'm Nick Farmer. I'm the town administrator for the Village of Alamance. This is Donald Tichy. He is our mayor for the Village of Alamance. And this is Mr. Bill Vincent. He is the director of the Alamance County Historical Museum. And we come today to present the Oak Grove Slave Cemetery Historical Designation. As you guys have read, the descendants of these formerly enslaved individuals went on to produce regional significant accomplishments, including testifying before Congress on active Ku Klux Klan activity within this area. They established the Springdale AME Church, which also doubled as one of the first training centers for teachers in this area. And it produced the first deputy sheriff, first African-American deputy sheriff in Alamance County. Currently, the property is of the ownership of the HOA for the Heritage Glen subdivision. In the application, we speak about working with the Heritage Glen subdivision to acquire the land and being able to maintain in its proper form. Those plans have changed a slightly bit. The village will most likely not acquire the property itself. The HOA will still retain ownership over the property, but they have told me, the HOA director is one of the aldermen on my board, and he has informally been preserving this land in a historical nature, really since the inception of Heritage Glen itself. And so we don't see really a change in terms of how the site needs to be kept. Maybe a little bit more significant maintenance, and then being able to properly identify exactly where we would like to maintain some sites, but ultimately that'll be something that the village works in conjunction with the HOA board. And the village is looking at, once this is or hopefully is designated as a local historical site, that we would go and place some type of historical marker on the roadside to identify the historical nature of the parcel itself. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you guys had any specific questions about the property itself, or the scope of the work that we're planning on doing.
Is it accessible? Do you have to cross into private properties in Heritage Glen to get to it? What is the access?
So it's not on private property, it's on HOA, general use property right now. It does butt up right against, a private property individual, or, so you can see it here. You can see that fence right on the corner. That is private property right there, but it's a separate parcel than the two parcels that the slave cemetery is located on right now. And so it is accessible to the general public.
As you join Yorkshire, it is right on Yorkshire Road.
Okay, so there's public right of way. It's.
Yes.
Yeah, right here you can see that the Yorkshire Drive runs right next to the cemetery itself.
Yeah, can you scroll down to the GIS screen capture? There we go. So the what's outlined in almost black, real dark gray, and then the blue outline, from what I understand, are the two parcels that we're talking about. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of road frontage there on Yorkshire. Thank you.
Plenty of room for a marker along the roadside.
Yeah, initially we were planning on doing a type of parking lot just to be able to have easier accessibility, and the maintenance upkeep with that was something that the board was a bit concerned with. So at this point, those plans have been shelved, not necessarily finished, but at least at this point, we're moving on with just trying to get the local designation. And then after that, we might look at trying to acquire some grant funding to help us out with fully initiating the project to its final scale. But ultimately, if it was designated local, historically, you guys would be the first ones to see what those site plans would look like and approve those site plans.
Was it always known as a cemetery, or for a number of years did it sort of just come under disarray and become rediscovered when this subdivision went in?
So before the Heritage Glen subdivision came in, I think that it was known that it was somewhere, but it wasn't identified as here's the exact place. It was known when the Heritage subdivision started to get constructed, because there were buffer areas done next to it, and kind of taking a step back, the subdivision was done in multiple phases. And so before phase 3, which involves this parcel, was created, there was sufficient buffer area. I believe it was 20 feet around any identifiable area that was set off to not be developed. And so that's why the two parcels of land have to this day not been developed.
So what provisions do you have in place should the HOA ever get to a point where it's not functioning to continue this preservation?
So we have multiple agreements with different contractors. They're not specific for historical preservation, but you know, you can, if we scroll back up to some of the live pictures, it's not like it's a building. Yeah, I think that would be great. You know, it's not like a building where we're gonna have engineering needs associated with the upkeep. It's more so just being able to properly cut the grass and maintain the appearance of the area. And so we'd be confident that some of our existing contractors that we have would be able to satisfy this work requirement if the village would be in the position of having to assume responsibility for the maintenance of this area.
And the village of Alamance is willing to enter in a contract into perpetuity with a contractor to maintain a piece of property that they do not own.
I can't speak for my board, but I would think that this is a very small property in terms of overall scale, especially for some of the other work that our contractors do. It wouldn't really be significantly more work than what they're already doing. But ultimately, you know, that would be a decision for my board to decide.
I guess where I'm going with this is how come the HOA or the board or the decision was to Village of Alamance is gonna take over possession of this and now you're not. What caused that?
Disagreements in terms of the overall scope of the project and ultimately the maintenance cost of the project itself was a concern for them. The board didn't feel like they had enough information at that time to understand what the total maintenance cost was. And so they didn't want to go and enter into a plan with our engineer to go and design these or really execute these parking lots with possibly a walkway without knowing what that potential annual cost to our budget would look like.
So it was the parking lot that caused the problem here, not the maintenance of the actual property.
I'd say so, yes, sir. I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
The village has no problem committing money for the signage and everything else. We had some board members who wanted to look at what, you know, it became just too large a scale once the ADA requirements came in and everything, because it's about 6 feet lower than the road.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden you're dealing with a whole bunch of ADA, which was starting to spiral out of control on it. So
Mhm.
they backed off. We had some objections on the board.
And the subdivision got curb and gutter in.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Mm.
So to put a parking lot in there, you want to do a curb cut and all that kind of stuff to.
Yeah, and that was a part of that draft proposal.
And then have handicap van accessible for.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and then we also had to grade the land so that it was gonna be able to have, I believe it was a 5% slope in there, so that was another.
Or
part of
less.
it. Mm.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's clearing it up for me. If anybody else got anything?
What about the, I see a house in that picture there. Have there been any concerns from any individuals in the subdivision about the plans to mark this as a historical marker? I know the HOA has one sort of viewpoint, but has anybody else from the subdivision come up?
No, in terms of the, so I had one comment from one individual that thought that we were trying to put a park here. And so it wasn't, you know, anything that we were trying to do at all. So that was the one comment I got. But outside of that, no village resident has voiced any concerns, at least to me, about the overall scale of the local designation.
No, it was cleaned up by one of the local scouts as an Eagle project a couple of years
Yeah, I
ago.
read that.
And the community loved it. There was nothing but people being happy that it had been cleaned up and made to look better than it did. So there's never been any objections to the cemetery itself. And we did, back when that house in the back got built, actually moved the cemetery line out because we had redone the GPR radar with the engineers. And they were a little bit nervous, so we took about 15 feet out of the backyard. And as a result, we had to actually issue one of our few variances we've ever issued to D.R. Horton, because we created the problem after the land had been originally platted and everything. So, yeah, we gave them the variance for the backyard setback. And, it's been, I've known about this cemetery for 18 years since I moved down. I knew it existed. I don't remember how I found out. Might have been my daughter, but I knew that it was there from the day I moved into the neighborhood.
I have one more. Are there any other buildings that are I mean, I know it's Heritage Glen subdivision, but, associated with the E.M. Holt, former, property that from that period, from the time period the cemetery was used, I'm just curious if there's anything around.
So the museum would be.
The museum is, it's located within a property that, was established in 1790 as the Holt family residence. The original portion of the house was built by Michael Holt. And it was added onto twice after that, once in, about 1800 and then again in 1875, when the Victorian character of the house was established at that point. In addition to the house itself, the museum is surrounded now by about 7 acres, and on that acreage there is the original granary building, which we are in the process of restoring presently. The corn crib is there. And there is a barn building that was the last building that was constructed by the Holts at that site, which that building dates to about 1885, during the latter period of time when the Holts lived there. So the property has, been established for a long time. Also, the Holt family cemetery, in other words, the cemetery where the Caucasian members of the Holt family were buried, is located on that site as well. There are about 16 graves in that enclosed cemetery. The slave cemetery was established, I am sure, on land that was not agriculturally productive to the Holt family. That's why it's in this sort of, as you heard described, it dips down, and it's not on level ground. So for that reason, it was probably not conducive to the Holts to use for purposes of agriculture. And so the slaves were allowed to establish that as a cemetery dwelling. We have the list of enslaved persons at the museum. We can document their names, and we can also determine potentially who was buried there, because you'd be looking at a period from 1790 until the outbreak or to the end of the Civil War in the 1860s. So we can go through that documented list and tell who died during that period of time. Now, we cannot individually pinpoint this grave is for this person, as this is for that person.
Right.
The graves themselves are not marked with any kind of
Right.
manufactured marker, but there are raw field stones,
Yeah.
primarily quartz crystal rock that was moved to the site at the time of the burials, perhaps. The entire area is also covered with Vinca minor, which in the 19th century was referred to as cemetery vine. It's not a native vine for this area, so it typically is planted. And when you go out into these forested areas and you typically see this vine, most often it's where there has been a previous burial at some point in time, because that was standard practice in the 19th century.
Thank you.
Approximately how far is the cemetery from the Holt house?
How far would you say, Don?
About half a mile.
Yeah, half a mile.
Well,
Yeah, I would
that's the
say
road
about
flies.
that. If you go as the crow flies, of course.
If you bring up GIS.
The way you have to
Yeah.
get to it, you circle around
Yeah,
through
It's
a number of
it's a
different
long drive, but
driveways.
it's
It's
very
drives.
close. Yeah, it's probably no more than 1,000 feet as the crow flies. But if you gotta go out the entrance up on 62 and around to the museum, it's somewhat further. And, but it's, yeah, just about 1,000 feet north of the museum, I'd say.
And of course, all those properties, as I said, on the museum site are listed in the National Register. And, and most of you all know, I'm sure, that Mr. Holt was, E.M. Holt was largely responsible for establishing the textile business here in the local area. And when that house became available back in the 1970s, that's one of the reasons that it was chosen as a museum property by the persons who were involved at that point in time.
Somebody ask them some questions so they feel like they're earning the keep.
I read the report, it's pretty complete.
Just to clarify, you said that the HOA is gonna pay to maintain.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's,
Okay, so when the HOA fees go up and all the owners decide that they don't want to do this, did you say that you guys will then pay for it?
so ultimately, that would be a decision that my board would have to make. But knowing the operation of the HOA, I believe it requires a 3/4 vote to increase their fees. So it's anything, I say that to say the HOA is very difficult to make any kind of decisions within that HOA is what I found. And so I would not anticipate that any fees are going to go up. In terms of that, I can't promise it. It's not my organization to run.
Well, even the, the
The HOA
appearance of fees going up,
The HOA has been maintaining it.
Right.
And the HOA fees, the HOA is currently not running any deficits. And the fees are nominal $100 a year, except if you're around the pond, and then they're $200 a year.
Sorry, I'm an accountant, it's just.
I know.
I just-
It's-
I-
Yeah, the HOA fee is so negligible to the people living in Heritage Glen that, if it doubled, it won't bother anybody. And, but again, the village, if need be, the village would take over maintenance, the responsibilities for that. As Nick says, it's in the noise in our budget because we maintain a couple miles of sewer line right away and everything. And add in a half acre or less of land, we maintain the public land at the entrance to the village. We maintain down hall itself and, add this in with the other stuff we do. The
Well, I
village
think-
budget is fine too.
So isn't there a easement there next to that?
There is a sewer easement.
So are y'all taking care of that now?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
That's a
so,
hard one.
yeah.
Yeah,
For me.
We
You're talking
maintain that, that's what you, next day.
Talking the
Those
extra
two
15
properties,
years.
but
So you can it's difficult to see, but this picture is probably the best one. They do go near where the slave cemetery is, but it does not run through the slave cemetery at all. So it's right next to where the slave cemetery is. So I guess to answer your question, yes, sir.
so the edge of the sewer easement.
Yeah.
And the edge of the cemetery. Do they come together or is there somebody else?
That was the impression I
property?
got.
They come together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in maintenance of the easement, you've got people and equipment right there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's why, I didn't want to say that directly, but that's why I said is we go on to that line now when we need to and everything. It's, the guy that does our sewer maintenance, will do anything we want him to do.
When I hear contractors and I hear we can do this, we can do that, and then we were gonna take this over and we didn't. That was a flag to me. If the town, if the village of Alamance had half a dozen people on the payroll in the mowing department and owned mowers and weed eaters and whatever, and you said, okay, now today, when y'all up there, get that cemetery. But if you've got somebody with a signed contract, and you say, by the way, while you're up there, get that contract, and they come back and throw a change order down and say, hey, this. Hopefully you don't get to that point, but understand how some contracts work.
I think we're fortunate in the village, and I know it's tough without actually experiencing the operations, but we're very fortunate in the village to have very good contract workers. I maybe have one that even is a slight issue, and it's no one associated with any kind of public work. And so, and like our mayor said, the overall budget of what we spend would not be significantly affected if we would have to maintain this property in the future. And it really originally was the plan that we would assume property or assume ownership.
To be honestly, that's still not dead, assuming ownership would, I just have to decide where the board stands on it and, we had a couple of vocal members, so we tabled it and, as you said, we need information on what maintenance will cost, but, we're currently spending, we're on over the next 3 years, we'll spend another $500,000+ on road maintenance that, will get us to the point where we don't even, we'll hopefully get a PDF right on that, but the village, from a operation standpoint, we run budget surpluses. We have not upped our tax rate in 10 years, give or take. We went totally revenue neutral when the county reassessed, and we have a few $1 million in village reserves. And I've been mayor for 10 years now, and this piece of property will be maintained one way or the other by us.
Okay.
I move we accept it.
Second.
So we've got a motion and a second to accept this proposal recommended to the commissioners for local historic designation. Set up the proper public hearings and all the stuff that goes along with it. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I do really appreciate it.
You are more than welcome to sit here and listen to the rest of this ad nauseum meeting. And if you'd rather not do that, we don't hold it against you. You sneak out. Well, we don't want to miss dinner for that. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys for hearing us and
Sure.
all your time spent, working through this. I do really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. That's it, you guys.
We appreciate you, Mr. Mitchell, also.
Thank you, ma'am.
As we're moving on, I'm gonna do an announcement here, so I don't forget mine.
Yeah.
I've been talking for a while about having some prints of some of Miss Hadley's granddaddy's barns. They're here. Y'all wanna come up and see them? Obviously not now, but when the meeting's over, they're here, and I can answer a few questions about it. She can probably answer more than I can. But anyhow, there's that. Now,
Also, I bought the book. My book, I read about that to her, and I'm sure she'll let you look at that too.
She may not.
First edition.
all right. So we wanna talk about Copeland Mills,
I'm ready when you are.
okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
So, there are several properties and structures within the Copeland Fabrics Complex, that are in your agenda packet. And they are scheduled to be presented to the North Carolina National Register Advisory Committee on June 13th, 2024. Two of these properties, which include one building, are considered contributing properties and are in the unincorporated area of the county. The rest are within the city limits of Burlington, or maybe the ETJ, but I think they're all technically in the city limits. The property prepared for your review at today's meeting is labeled as the water plant. And the following detailed description of this structure is found on section 7, page 13 of the report in your agenda packet. Quote, the water plant has a poured concrete lower level, likely containing settlement tanks that extend northwest into the slope of the parcel. The upper level is brick to the east, and to the west is a frame gabled rear wing addition. West of and adjacent to the building is a cylindrical concrete structure, likely a storage reservoir. To the south of the adjacent is a cylindrical metal tank set within a square poured concrete foundation. The facade, southeast elevation, has a central entrance flanked by industrial metal windows. There, a single leaf replacement door is accessed by concrete steps that ascend to the northeast of a platform with metal railings. The southwest, northeast, and northwest elevations are framed by projecting corner pilasters made of concrete at the lower level and brick at the upper level. The upper level pilasters extend beyond the concrete coping with concrete caps. On the southwest, southeast, and northeast elevations, the upper level has a recessed panel topped by broad corbelling to an upper brick panel, On the facade, the recessed brick panel houses 3 windows obscured by metal awnings. Above the windows in the upper panel are the words water plant in affixed capital letters. The concrete coping above supports concrete letters spelling Copeland, which rise above the roof line. The southwest elevation has 2 sets of paired windows set high in the lower level. In the upper level, industrial windows flank a double leaf door, once reserved or once serviced by an exterior stair. The northeast elevation is not entirely visible due to undergrowth. It has one multi-pane metal industrial window on the lower level and 2 above. For this property consideration, you're being asked to complete or endorse one of these statements as found on page 7 in the report to either recommend or not recommend these properties for listing in the registry. The county commissioners will also need, or at least the chairman of the county commission will also need to determine recommending or not recommending, and the deadline for these submissions is June the 12th. I will also note that you will need a motion to officially open a public hearing on this matter. In accordance with public hearing procedures, a sign was placed at this property. Letters were mailed to adjoining property owners, notifying them of today's hearing date, and a notice was posted on the county website. As you deliberate, we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. And Ian's pulled up a Google Street View of the property in question. So as I mentioned, we could pull up the GIS if you would like, but there's more or less a property line that runs through that gravel drive. Not exactly, but just perpendicular to the road. So there is a smaller vacant parcel in this picture would be kind of to the bottom right, and the larger parcel that has the water plant on it there. So it's 2 properties, but 1 structure. All of the other properties and structures are inside the city limits of Burlington. It's a satellite annexation. There we go.
Yeah. So these are the properties, other properties of the mill and fabric plant.
Yeah.
And then these are the 2 that are in county jurisdiction.
Right. So that larger property there is the one that features the water plant. But since the rest are out of the county's jurisdiction, obviously they're holding a separate hearing for the larger portion of the property. That's our understanding.
Yes.
Do we know when their hearing is?
I don't know, and we've gone through City of Burlington, or I believe the National Register request came from City of Burlington because a portion of it is in county jurisdiction. That's why it's coming to us and the commissioners for recommendation.
Says June 13th. Letter.
That's when the National Register Advisory meeting is. Yes.
So there's not gonna be an issue with, we would approve those 2 and then Burlington ends up saying no.
I'm not sure if it would necessarily be an issue. I mean, ultimately, I think this is just an advisory recommendation. So your motion to recommend or not recommend goes to the state. The state, I got that before me somewhere. The North Carolina National Register Advisory Committee. And so I assume that advisory committee then makes a recommendation as to whether or not to place it on the national registry. And I have the signature blocks figured out or printed out. If you'd like to see them now, I'm happy to share them with you. But basically, it's 2 different certificates. The first essentially says, we, the Historic Property Commission, have reviewed and discussed the nomination for Copeland Fabrics and find that the property meets the criteria for listing on the National Registry of Historic Places, as stated in section 8 of the report. We therefore recommend that the property be submitted for listing in the registry. Certificate B says that, but do not recommend. And then the very next page has essentially the same certificates, the opportunity for the signature of the chairman of the county commission. And that's on page.
So who's actually making the request?
Burlington, I believe the city of Burlington was making the request.
Okay.
I can. Here. So here's the signature blocks there, they're talking about with that. And then these were the commissioners.
It'd be right there.
So,
isn't it?
If you're counting front and back, it'll be on page 7 of the report.
Trying to look for specifically applicant here. But here's the descriptions of it, you know, well, general, but page 7 is specifically the, water plant, which section again was it?
For the, water plant,
Yeah,
it's 13, section 7, page 13, right there.
yeah, yeah, right here.
Yep,
Yep,
right there.
yeah.
What was the year of that?
52, I think.
1960?
Or 1950 for the water plant.
50/50 for the water plant.
Did y'all run across anything in it?
No, I don't, we didn't run across anything that was odd or concerning.
Okay.
About any of this.
No issues with the HOA keeping it up?
We didn't go that far.
So this is just, this commission, I'm assuming that since we're reviewing this, we review any National Register nominations that come up in the county before they go to the NREC committee, is that right? I mean, I don't know, that's why I'm asking, is this just a National Register nomination, it's nothing else, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an excellent question, and I'm really not sure. A lot of this procedure on historic property commission operations is still pretty new to me too.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
And I don't know, I might be assuming too much, but I would assume that they think it might strengthen their application. To
Oh,
have
okay,
the counties
makes sense, yeah.
buy in on this small portion of the overall property as well.
Who owns the property now anyway? That's,
It's all owned by, it's like Carolina Textiles LLC or something
Or
like
High
that.
Falls Mills LLC.
Yeah, High Falls Mills LLC.
Are they intending to use tax credits or maybe that's why they're probably,
Really not sure.
Those don't come with a national register listing. That would be the local landmark listing.
well, you
But
can
yeah,
also
You can
do,
apply for.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
you get like a 10%,
that's true.
With
I mean,
national
possibly.
yeah. In North Carolina, you can use, they have a mills, they used to have like a mills bill where you could get a really big one for textile mills, but I don't think that's still in place. But I was just curious. I mean, I thought the nomination looked good though, from what they sent.
a lot of history in that place.
Yeah.
Not sure about the water plant necessarily, but
I was gonna say, is it detrimental to the whole scope of it if the water plant isn't included?
It's a good question. I'm not really sure. And I don't know where they might plan to place a sign.
Here stands the water
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did an assessment and looked at the water plant and they said, well, wait a minute, that's not also. in
Yeah.
city limits? And they determined that it wasn't, and then they shared the request with us.
And so the same people who own the mill, do they currently own that segment right
It
there?
looks like it, yeah.
Okay,
according to the
so
tax-
there's no one saying like, oh, I would actually love to develop this and knock it down or anything like that. It's the same people who own it.
Well, if they get it approved, then they'll have to come and ask if they do that.
Well, yeah, but we don't know that.
Yeah, it looks like common ownership, High Falls Mills LLC for all the properties. Yeah, can you turn off the ETJ layer and zoom out a little bit? Sure. This will give you a sense, yeah, so that's the, just to look a little more broadly,
You won't get an aerial with it, but,
yeah, and then click back on the cities
oh, the city layer,
layer.
oh, sure.
What you see there in light blue is city of Burlington.
Yeah.
And then if you click on the ETJ, it's kind of a hash pattern, and that is obviously their ETJ. So they have planning and zoning jurisdiction in the hashed areas and then official incorporation in the solid blue area. So I'm not sure at what point they reached out and grabbed the properties here, but it is technically in the city limits of Burlington. Except for this property that the water plant that we're discussing on the other side of the road is left out.
So how does the management of something like that for like the city? Does it cede that portion to the city? Is it its own sort of separate
Yeah.
maintenance or?
Yeah, I mean, they've got full taxing, police powers, planning and zoning authority, you name it, for that portion. The state changed their annexation laws within the last 10 years, so I'm not sure when this was pulled into the city, but if it was in the last 10 years, I think you have to get 60% of the subject property owners to consent to the annexation, but if it's all under common ownership, it's either 100 or nothing, right? So I don't know the specific history of it, but I just thought it was interesting to note the differential between the unincorporated parcels versus the properties that are inside the city limits.
So procedure for us to move forward with this. We need to call ourselves into a public hearing.
Yep.
Open the floor for comments,
Correct.
close it,
Mhm.
and make a motion on this.
Yes,
And we gotta do that before when?
by June the 12th. So technically you would,
And we've advertised for a public hearing tonight,
yes,
and there's nobody here.
correct.
Okay,
Technically you would endorse one of these certificates or the other, one of these statements or the other. Or as a certified local government, you have 60 days in which to comment on the proposed nomination. If you do not respond by June 12th on the proposed nomination, approval of it will be assumed. That's according to the letter that leads the.
all right,
Packet
well,
of
let's just,
information on this.
let's just weigh the odds here. Is anybody not in favor of this water plant being recognized as a local landmark? So we're all in favor of this being a local landmark. Okay, does anybody here want to speak about it?
I think you will technically need a motion to hold a public hearing. And then-
Or do nothing, and then it's automatically approved,
That's true.
which is where I was going.
Okay.
So if we're all in agreement to doing this, there's a whole lot of banjo work we can leave out by just not doing anything and letting it be approved by default, unless y'all just want to jump through the hoops.
Is there anything that could happen in between that? we sort of let it happen organically. Is there anything between now and then that could come up? to
The only thing
Change that?
The only thing I might think would throw a wrinkle in it is, so we are planning to get this at least before Chairman Paisley, but possibly also before the entire Board of Commissioners. And if and when they look at it, they might go, well, wait a minute, didn't the HPC look at this? Why didn't they sign it? Why didn't they sign it one or the other?
Yep.
Maybe they won't ask, but it could kind of throw a wrinkle in it.
I'll be glad to put a word in their ear
Okay,
so that they don't have a hiccup about that.
okay.
So if we approve, this would be approval for the entire mill, not just. the
No,
water
just the
plant.
water.
Just the water plant.
Yes, because that's the only property that you have the authority to designate or to make an
But it's
advisory,
just the water plant.
make an advisory decision designated.
A local landmark, not just approval of it for the National Register, correct?
It would just be for inclusion with all the other properties for the National Register.
Right.
Right, it's not for a
Not
local.
for local.
Yeah.
Not for local.
Right, okay, just,
Like a sign doesn't have to go up.
right.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and say yes to whatever they're asking. Rather than the commissioner saying,
Why didn't you?
you know,
I'll second.
All right, give me the paper. Got a motion to go in public hearing. All in favor, aye?
Huh?
Opposed? Have you got the verbiage for calling this into a public hearing?
I think you've already done it.
So we don't have to read that litany of all that stuff.
What do you mean?
Well, in the past, when we went into a public hearing, there's about 2 pages of what you have to read off to set up for it, but that's what I was trying to get out of doing.
Hmm,
So we ain't gonna do that. Oh, okay.
not that I'm aware.
All right, well, all right, so now we're in the public hearing. Does anybody want to speak to this? Okay, hearing none. Are we in favor of doing this or not? Need a motion one way or the other?
Motion to do it.
Okay,
Second.
okay. All in favor? All right,
Aye.
opposed? So we, the Alamance County Historic Properties Commission, have reviewed and discussed the nomination for Copeland Fabrics and find the property meets the criteria for listing in the National Register of Historic Places as stated in Section 8 of the report. We therefore recommend that the property be submitted for listing in the register. Everybody good with that? Okay. You can do it now, you can do it in the meeting over.
I think you're good to sign it, and you also need a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks, sir.
All right, so now, do we want to talk about the America 250?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Is Arnetta on? Did you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I don't know what it's like over in Graham, but it was, you could not see in front of the face in your car. So it was, I had to turn around, and I appreciate the time. So I just want to say about America 250. Oh, I think I put it in the chat and I didn't send it. So I'm going to put the link to the North Carolina site. So anybody who has collected a bicentennial quarter or listen to someone talk about the Mecklenburg Declaration versus the versus the Halifax Resolve. That's talking about the bicentennial of the American Revolution. And if you're like me, I definitely trace my love of history to being a little child living in North Carolina in the summertime of July 4th, 1976, where the tall ships, I saw those on TV and people were reenacting, and it was just red, white, and blue all the time. American history was really just alive for me. And I just want to make sure that it's the same 50 years later for kids, adults, elders, and we have so much more knowledge now that I think it would be great to have an America 250 committee. I know about this because in my work, I work with archivists, and the state archives had a workshop on this last year. They wanted to know how to shape this, and what they ended up doing was creating county committees. So each county has a committee to coordinate all kinds of things, but basically to have programming to make history come alive. And to me, it just makes so much sense for, number one, for Alamance to have it, because so many events in Alamance are even before 1776. And for Alamance, to bring these stakeholders like libraries, historical commission, and places like the cemetery that we just talked about, to bring those folks together and just to be able to have walking tour or bake off. I personally love the idea of having, what they call cosplay now, but costume contests, because I did that when I was in elementary school. But this is just a way for us to make sure that it happens. And I personally would love to coordinate it. I don't know a lot of folks in the other historical type organizations. So when I talked to the people down in Raleigh, they said there was not an Alamance group yet, but I'm sure that there are groups across our county that may have the same idea, and I'm more than happy to just work with them or support them. But I didn't want us to miss this. And, I guess being one of the older people around now, not everybody remembers and is anticipating something coming 2 years from now the way I am. So that's it. That's what I would hope that we would establish.
Thank you for sharing with us. Anybody?
Okay. Is she still on?
Maybe.
I mean, are we
I'm
being,
on. I'm on.
Yeah.
I just didn't want you to have to look at me. Look at me the whole time.
I mean,
Official motion.
Planning and organizing events, projects, and initiatives, county level. Local conduit for state commemorative programs on the rich history of our state and local.
Is it within this board's purview to create such a thing? Is that what?
I think it's
Question
within this board's purview to say, is anybody here that would like to work with her to serve on this?
Okay.
And potentially reach out to some other perspectives in the community. Do you have an idea, Ms. Arnetta, how many people you'd like to have on this county committee?
I think it is a question of whoever would want to be on it. I think, like, when I've done programs that are based at the schools where I work, having at least 4 people just helps distribute the burden. But you don't want just one person dominating everything. But another group that I didn't mention is tourism. County tourism boards tend to like this thing, and other counties, because so many people move back and forth, that I think there would be, it would make sense to have like at least 5 people, and that it would be easy to find that.
Well, I'd be interested in helping with something like this. I don't know about anybody else.
It's a possibility these Harvey Mills barns could be incorporated in that event.
They certainly qualify. And especially if you're gonna go to trouble to tie tourism in, have people
Exactly.
traveling around.
Oh, let me mention one other thing. They have local grants and I already started writing one up. I don't expect the group to necessarily be able to vote on that, but just to know that I think there's already some support for counties doing these things because they know not everybody is, Mecklenburg, but I literally was in a room with people arguing about the Mech deck in Mecklenburg versus the Halifax resolves. Like it was, world, wrestling. So it can be fun.
I have the same types of arguments. I'm with you.
I have a question. Is this the commission that's supposed to be acting on this, or are the individuals here that might like to serve on the committee, or? What are we supposed to be, what are we supposed to be doing right now?
That was like, what are we being asked to do? Is the question. Just volunteer, or are we saying as a board or a commission, we're gonna?
Is Ian there? Because I think I sent the email asking, could we do this? And I don't remember exactly, but Ian seemed to have an idea of who to ask. I don't know if I'm gonna close my Zoom or stop my video because it might say who has the right to decide. Hold on.
I would like to see the Alamance County Historic Commission to be in the loop, all of us collectively be in the loop of this project of 250 Genesee County Committee. And then as individuals, just as we do now, contribute. But I would still like for the whole group to be collectively as a part of this. Because certainly it's preservation.
Okay, well, let's do it this way. Is anybody in here interested in serving on this, I'm gonna call it a subcommittee, advisory board group?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, I want everybody to, then yes.
okay. Well,
I want everybody to be in the loop,
what,
but that's my opinion.
I understand that, but where I'm going with it is, what I'd like to do now is get somebody to make a motion that we form a subcommittee of this board to work with Miss Arnett and possibly some other people from the county. And that right there is the connection to this board every month. You could potentially have a report as to what's going on. So that's where I was.
That's certainly, I'm in agreement with what you just said.
Okay, all right, you want to make that motion?
I would like to make the motion that we have a subcommittee to contribute, to be a part of Ms. Arnetta's
250,
commission
250.
okay, all right,
and report back to this,
don't put too many words in there, I gotta repeat that.
That's right, yeah.
the subcommittee, yes.
Okay,
Second.
all right, so we've got a motion and a second, form a subcommittee. Is there any discussion? All right, if you'd like to serve on that subcommittee, raise your hand.
John.
So you're right,
I don't know when I would squeeze it in.
I'm just asking a
It would
question.
be.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to have a subcommittee to work with Miss Miss Arnetta on this 250 program. And everybody here, but Lori is willing to serve on the committee. She just doesn't have time. Some of the rest of us don't either, but we try to find it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now we've got a subcommittee. Oops. And you're on. But,
You gotta do
every,
the reports.
yeah, every time that the committee works, then the board will get a report. And there's your connection to keep everybody up to speed. Okay. Do you know what just happened, Miss Arnetta?
I think so, but I wouldn't mind if you repeated it.
I'm not sure I'm smart enough to repeat it. But we have just created a subcommittee of the Historic Properties Commission to work with you on this.
Awesome.
Yep.
I will
Who's gonna be our contact?
so much.
Okay, so are you in agreement to, for the time being till we get set up, working through the planning office with either Matthew or Ian and telling them what you need and let them reach out to the other board members?
Absolutely.
All right. Be the planning office.
He needed
You
something
know, I
else to
think.
do.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, it needs to have a central place.
It does.
Okay. All right. Have you got any announcements?
Dude,
Oh, good.
you know, I like to save them. You know, I like to save them for the end. All right, so, I think you alluded to this earlier, but, with regards to procedure on, the Guthrie Mill Dam and now the, Village of Alamance Slave Cemetery. And reading through the general statutes, we are going to have to prepare public hearings for those items now, for the June meeting. And it's frustrating me too, the Guthrie Mill Dam hasn't moved further along. We've talked to the county attorney's office. Trying to just narrow down exactly what we need to do procedurally to make sure that we go through everything, the right way. In my reading of General Statute 160D-946, we'll either need to have a joint public hearing with the HPC and the commissioners together or separate public hearings. To me, a joint public hearing is probably going to be a logistical nightmare. So probably independent public hearings would be the best way to go. So just from a procedural standpoint, we will do everything we need to do to prepare that and have it on the June agenda, both for the Guthrie Mill Dam report as well as the Village of Alamance Slave Cemetery. So that's all I've got for the announcements.
So with that, will people who owners, for example, of these things, 3 people and the owner of the mill and
They'll be invited, but
I believe what we need to do is run a public hearing notice twice in the Alamance News. But I'm gonna do a little bit more research and see if we need to specifically contact property owners in the process as well. I wouldn't mind contacting property owners directly because a newspaper notice is so vague, so broad that they may not. So
his residence in Chapel Hill, so he probably don't use Alamance News.
So keep in mind, when you've got an issue like that dam and it's being designated a local historic landmark, and you set the public hearing, the possibility of having somebody to come and speak against it is nil. And if it's gonna happen, having a room full of people say, hey, I think that's a great idea, should have been done last year, should have been done 10 years ago. Well, that's fine, but if it's in process to be done, it's in process to be done. And what that public hearing is really about is giving folks that think it's a bad idea. You don't want to do that? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. You want to give them a chance to come up and vent. So that when it happens, then they start running their mouth. They say, well, you come up there and talk about it, but everybody voted for it. That's what it's more about that than it's a procedural matter. And in this case right here, just like tonight, this was advertised. I had no clue about that. Because I'll see the Alamance News and all that, but the 3 people came to talk about what was gonna happen. We asked them some questions to answer, but nobody came.
So that was a public hearing already?
Yeah.
So
you just had one.
What's lacking now is the Guthrie Mill not having a public hearing.
To clarify, For the slave report, that wasn't a public hearing. The public hearing advertisement we did was for the National Register.
Correct.
District.
Yeah, the
because
water plant.
That had to be set up.
Different,
Specific,
so from these three
Yeah.
gentlemen, okay.
Correct.
Yes,
Technically different procedures.
so we would be
National-
holding.
And I led you to hear that wrong.
Okay, I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm learning,
Me,
teacher.
me and you both, me and you both. Yeah.
So yeah, so we would be next month holding an official public hearing for both the Guthrie dam and the
The cemetery.
Well, then I shall invite people
Sure,
There you go.
Absolutely.
to
Please do.
come.
that's right.
Please do.
Okay.
But that's all that I've got for announcements, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I know that Eric is, when we talk about the John Braxton and the Pat Bailey markers,
Mhm.
last month, we skipped because he was out of town, and I don't know where he's right now. Could there be a code, in case he's not here next month, could we have a second person to be on that committee or something?
Well, what I'll be glad to do is reach out to him. Last month, he
He's out of town.
he reached out to me, he had an emergency. I've not talked to him in the last few days. So I don't know if it slipped up. I just can't answer that, but I will reach out to him and find out. And next month, either he'll be here to tell us what's going on, or I'll have a report from him.
Well, okay, Mr. Chairman, but were you not, Laura, were you not working with, him on the wording of the,
Robbie,
were you not working with Eric?
Eric,
Were you not working with him on the wording of the, commemoration of Pat Bailey and John Braxton things?
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, could we not worry particularly about, in case, let her speak for us, both of them speak for us next month,
Sure.
so that we won't have a second month with this
No,
going
oh.
on, because I know that the families have
Yeah.
been expecting this for, since Christmas.
Yeah. Okay, so I have sent the verbiage to both families,
Mhm.
and they have signed off on it,
Yes,
and this board has approved it.
yes.
So I think the next step is to get the stuff together and make the actual presentation. Isn't that where we are with?
that's where I thought we were.
Okay,
So
All right.
regardless of who's present next month, we should be able to make a decision on that, I hope.
so I think we'll be able to make a decision on when we're gonna make a presentation, if that's your question. Do you want to invite the families to come to the next?
No, not if it's, again, like tonight, they wanted to come last month, or volunteered to come last month.
Okay,
And I said, well, I'm not sure, please give us some more time, and then it
okay,
didn't happen tonight,
okay,
and I'm afraid, no, I don't want to invite them.
okay. Well,
Do you see my
so
frustration?
I do, and I appreciate you putting it in words. Are you and Eric working on something together now?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, it's, my understanding was we were to the point where they
Yeah, we'd
were
already-
going to be produced and presented.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Okay, let me reach out to him and see what, I'll let you
Okay.
know something on this.
Well, I plan to come to the next meeting, that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
So you gonna be,
Yeah, he's my former student.
Yeah, you're getting ready to put him in the corner, aren't
policy teacher that she is and was, although it many years ago. When baloney showed up as a spelling word,
Uh-huh.
and that was on the test, she allowed us a moment of time to go and work all the way through it. And everybody in the class got that one correct on the test. That way you remember it.
No, sir.
Was it, did you use the Oscar Mayer?
That's exactly what it was. My baloney has a first name. So it's,
You probably spelled it Oscar, didn't you?
Yeah. Boloney.
Hey,
Okay. Make it official.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Good evening, folks. And come see these pictures if you want to.
They're good. Show